In the early days of Clash of Clans, Giants were one of the most loved and most used troops in the game, but in recent years, it seems like most people have just completely forgotten about them and stopped using them. And today, we will be looking at the history of the Giant and seeing just why everybody forgot about them. The Giant was one of the original troops in the game and was unlockable straight from Town Hall level 1. It was the only tanky troop in the game, except for the Pekka, which would get unlocked at Town Hall 8. This would make it a very useful troop and something that was used in almost every army at the lower Town Hall levels. And for the super low level Town Halls, the Giant was almost a necessity because no other troops could tank the defenses long enough to deal good enough damage. A typical army at this stage of the game would consist of wall breakers, giants, barbarians, and archers, with the strategy being to drop 1 or 2 giants first, then let the wall breakers go and make an opening in the base, and then putting the rest of the giants followed by the barbarians and archers. And at Town Hall 5, the barbarians and archers were typically replaced by the wizards, which were considered to be pretty OP at the lower Town Hall levels at that time. And in some cases, people would even use the healers to heal the giants while they were tanking. But after Town Hall 6 is where the decline of the Giants really started. This is because at Town Hall 7 you could unlock the dragon, and as we all know and as I've talked about in multiple videos, dragons were extremely OP and considered to be one of the most broken troops in the game, especially when you pair them up with the balloons that you unlock at Town Hall 4. This emergence of air armies is partly a reason for why everyone stopped using giants, especially because air armies seem to dominate the higher Town Hall levels. But there was something else that was much bigger that caused everyone to forget about the giants, and that was Town Hall 7 and Town Hall 8. These Town Halls introduced 3 new troops, the Barbarian King, the Golem, and the Pekka, and each of these was better than the Giant in pretty much every way possible. First of all, these 3 new troops were all considered to be tanky, which was basically the whole appeal of the Giant, but these new troops just did it much better. Starting off with the Barbarian King, well, the level 1 King already has more HP than the level 8 Giant, and by level 11 he has around the same HP as a max level Giant. Plus, he has a special ability which he unlocks at level 5 that regenerates a big chunk of his health that makes him even stronger and faster. And speaking of strength, the King can easily do 10 times the damage as a Giant, especially with the special ability. The only downside is that there can only be 1 King while there can be many giants. But then comes the Golem, which you can have multiple of in your army. The max level Golem has 4 times the health as a max level Giant and deals slightly more damage. Plus, the Golem also deals damage when it dies and spawns in smaller Golems that can also tank quite a bit and, in a way, are like mini giants. The only downside would be that the Golem takes up more housing space than the Giant. But now comes the Pekka, which is kind of like a combination of the King and Golem. The Pekka has a bit less health than the Golem but does even more damage than the King and also requires less housing space than the Golem. And like I said earlier, all 3 of these things got unlocked between Town Hall 7 and Town Hall 8 and almost instantly made the Giant useless since there were much better options. And there was also another problem that many people sometimes look over, and that is spring traps. Up to 3 giants can be killed by a single spring trap, which obviously isn't good since giants usually travel in groups. And if a single spring trap can basically ruin an attack, then that strategy probably isn't good, especially because the giants are at the front of the line and are kind of meant to get all the traps for the troops behind them. And another issue for the giants at the higher Town Hall levels was the defenses. The defenses got a lot stronger than the giants at the similar levels, which made them quite disproportionate and made it so that splash defenses like wizard towers and bomb towers could deal a significant amount of damage to groups of giants in a pretty short amount of time. Plus, at Town Hall 10, the Inferno towers were released and the single targets could melt through giants and other tankers if other troops couldn't destroy them fast enough. And Town Hall 11 only made it worse for the giants because the Eagle Artillery was released, as well as the Ice Golems, which were just even more competition for the giant, as these were not only stronger and tankier, but they also slowed down the defenses instead of just tanking them, which made the ice golems even more effective. And at Town Hall 11, you could also unlock the electric dragons, which had a similar effect as unlocking the normal dragons at Town Hall 7. And from Town Hall 11 onwards, air armies would really start dominating, especially the electro dragons and balloons. This would reduce the need for ground soakers in general, but would especially affect the giants since they were essentially the last in line to be picked for an army, and the reason typically was just because of their lower housing space. Over the years, Supercell has tried making the giants better by constantly buffing their health and damage. In fact, the giants have literally never received a nerf, yet they just aren't good enough for the higher tunnel levels, and are in a pretty similar situation as the Valkyries, who have also gotten many buffs but just aren't good enough at the higher tunnel levels. And similar to the Valkyrie, it seems like what they really need is a major rework so that they can have some sort of edge over other tankers, since right now the only thing they have going for them is their low housing space. So while in the normal village it seems like giants seem to have died out around 2015, they did make a brief resurgence in 2017 with the builder base. In its early stages, the builder base definitely brought back a lot of the early game metas involving the barbarians, archers, giants, and wall breakers, and it was a nice way for players to use troops that they didn't always use at the higher town hall levels in the normal base, with one of them being the giant. The builder-based giant mainly served the same purpose that it did in the normal base and was also really only used in the lower builder hall levels. And you could say that the giant was used even less here than in the normal base because at builder hall level 3, you unlock the crusher, which is the biggest counter for any melee ground troops, since it deals a ton of damage and also has a relatively high amount of health, which is really bad for the giants as they do very little damage. The addition of the crusher definitely made it a lot harder to use the giants and made it so that you had to plan your attack much more strategically. But even after the addition of the crusher, the giants were still used pretty often and often paired up with the cannon carts. But like with the home village, over time as the builder halls got stronger and more troops and defenses got unlocked, the use of giants slowly declined. The biggest case of this was probably when you unlocked the witches, since those really took over the builder base, similar to how the dragons did with the home village. The mass witch spam strategy was pretty easy and required much less skill to pull off compared to any strategy using the giants. And this, along with other troops, caused the giants to die off and be forgotten in the builder base. And finally, you also have the clan capital, but let's be honest, nobody really ever used the giants in the clan capital even when it first came out. The clan capital already had much better strategies, with the main one being the sneaky archers. So the giant never even got a chance to be used in the clan capital, and I guess people forgot about it as soon as they saw the other troops available. Overall, the giant was really only useful in the early stages of the game, and the introduction of new troops and defenses just made people forget about them and stop using them, which put them in a similar situation as the Valkyrie. And if you want to learn more about that, then make sure to click on this video as I go into much more detail.